we are back with a very special guest. I am honored to be joined by Wylecia Wiggs Harris today. Dr. Wiggs Harris is CEO of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. That's actually the world's largest organization of nutrition and dietetics practitioners. So, really excited to be talking with Dr. Wiggs Harris. This is a position she's held since July of 2023. So I want to talk about her journey and how she got here and what she's learned along the way. And, Dr. Wiggs Harris, if there's anything else in the introduction you wanted to mention or introduce yourself to our listeners, I'd love to learn more about how you get to where you're at.
Well, the one thing I like to share with individuals when I speak with them is that I was a reluctant leader. I was not someone who really wanted to lead. I was happy being an independent performer, and that's an important part of my story, and it's an important part of my journey to the seat I sit in today.
Yeah, and you have had a pretty illustrious career to get to where you're at. We don't have to dive into all of the details, but I will make mention on a high level. It looks as though you entered the kind of the association nonprofit world, as we were discussing before we hit record on the interview. The American Heart Association is actually where you kind of originally got involved in the association world. I believe the South Carolina affiliate, and then also moved up to DC. So maybe just tell me about how you found that organization. We can start there.
Well, I wish I could say that my career was very planned and intentional. It wasn't. When I left Kellogg Business School, unlike many of my colleagues who went on to work in the pharmaceutical industry, I actually left work without a job. And in part, I left work without a job because I couldn't interview well. I'm introverted, I'm shy, I'm reserved, and all of those things can work against you in many ways. And as I have subsequently learned, they can also work for you. So I wind up going back to Columbia, South Carolina, and I saw a blind ad. I applied for it, was fortunate enough to land the job, and that is how my career in the nonprofit space started. Now, I'll be honest and say I spent the first 2 years trying to get out of the nonprofit space and do something different. And then I finally accepted that the space aligned well with my personality and with my skill set. And why do I say that? I become bored very easily. I'm someone who loves the diversity of experiences that the nonprofit space and professional associations in general provide you. I'm also someone who loves to make an impact. That's very important to me. I believe that's an important reason that we're put on this earth is to make a difference in the lives of others. And over the course of my career, I've had an opportunity to do so.
Well, I want to ask you a lot about your advice for introverts who are in our field, because I hear a lot of times, I'm very introverted. I'm very introverted. I hear it a lot. I hear it more than people, self-identify as extroverts, I think. So tell me, what kind of advice would you have to an introvert that's working in the, association community, maybe just in any, in any line of work? What kind of advice would you have for an introvert that has like leadership ambitions?
Mhm. Well, it's interesting that you have heard it so frequently, more frequently, that people are introverts than extroverts. First of all, you have to believe in yourself and the value that you bring. Whether you're introverted or you're extroverted, you still are an individual that brings value. You are still an individual that's capable of leading and being a successful leader. That is a narrative of negative a narrative of negative self-talk that I had to get past to realize that the way in which I showed up as an introverted leader was no less impactful than those who are extroverted leaders. The other thing is that I would share is that introversion is about where your energy source comes from. And I am a firm believer that you must have healthy leaders in order to have healthy organizations. So one of the things that I had to learn was how to restore myself, how to restore my energy sources. And that's important, again, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. I would also share that it's important that we surround ourselves with individuals who are not like us. And so, as an introverted leader, I have learned it's important that I have extroverted members on my team. Now, introversion is not an excuse for not engaging. And I think one of the areas that many introverted leaders struggle is from a networking perspective. So here's my view of networking, which I will say differs it's very different from my husband, who is an extrovert. I know that when I walk into a room, in order to leave that room, I have to make three impactful connections. And once I've made three impactful connections, I'm free to leave. And so that is how I have learned to navigate that space, especially when I'm going into an environment where I know no one. Now, when I'm going into an environment where I at least know one or two individuals, then that's a different networking looks different. I also look for someone in the room who looks uncomfortable because they're probably feeling isolated and alone more than I am. And if I can strike up a conversation with them, it helps to settle me. I also think as an introverted leader, questions are our best friend. So I always have in my leadership toolkit a number of questions. And one of the great things about us as introverted leaders is that most of us are wonderful listeners. And we know that people love to be able to tell their story. And if you can ask an impactful question that allows someone else to begin talking, you will actually find your own rhythm and you will settle down into that conversation. So those are some of the things I've learned.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is a real good rundown of some of the advantages or perceived advantages and disadvantages of being an introvert. And you mentioned networking. So, and three impactful, I think that's good advice. I think even if you're an extrovert, networking can be tough. Sometimes breaking the ice and just getting going. I'm not sure if I'm an introvert or an extrovert. Sometimes I'm feeling it, sometimes I'm not. But
Well,
you said, I want to hold that thought. I want to ask you about three impactful networking interactions before you're feeling comfortable, you know, moving on or having or leaving that networking event if it's an event or something. Tell me about that. What is an impactful networking? How do you know? Is it just something you know?
it depends on the type of networking event and why I'm there.
Okay, for sure.
So if I'm at an event and the reason I'm there is because of the job, then walking away with a contact that helps to push our mission forward, I consider that an impactful event. If I'm more on a social level and I walk away with an opportunity to carry forward a conversation one on one into a deeper conversation that may support me on a personal level or may also support the job, then I consider that an impactful interaction. So it varies.
Okay, and just jumping back there, I had mentioned, yeah, I wasn't sure if I'm introvert, extrovert. Some days I'm just feeling it, some days I'm not. There was something you were going to interject with. I want to go back to that.
I was going to say I'm a socialized extrovert. So over time, I have learned how to engage, and I'm a high energy person. So that does help me be a socialized extrovert. People I work with, and even my family members, do not believe I'm an introvert. But when I come back from a business trip, or I've come back, let's stick with the business trip example. My husband and I have a routine that he had to learn. You pick me up from the airport. Depending on the time of day, we're going to have a meal together. You're going to bring, and over that meal, I'm going to tell you how my trip went. I'm going to answer all of your questions. We get home, you're going to bring the luggage in the house. I'm going to unpack all the luggage. You're going to disappear, and I'm going to curl up on the bed with my cat. And that's one of the ways that I'm going to restore my energy source. And I don't really want to talk to anyone until the next day. Now, An extrovert really needs to be around people. That's how they're going to get their energy source. So when you're married to someone who's the exact opposite of you, you know that my husband's energy sources are being drained at the same time that mine are being increased because he needs to engage and he needs to have conversation, ongoing conversation. So where
That
do you
is,
think you fall on that scale?
I think I mean, it's a cop out, but I feel like honestly, like it's a balance of both for myself. I certainly have those days where solitude and I need to recharge the battery that way. But then there's too much of that becomes not a good thing for
Mhm.
me, and I need to get out there and, you know. So tell me, I want to know more about the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. This is a very large membership base. Do you want to let's start maybe by talking to me about a little size and scope? How large of an organization are we talking, and what are your primary responsibilities there?
We have approximately 112,000 practitioners. That's the size of our community. Our membership is close to 50,000. So that gives you some scope of the size of the organization. So I'd say we're a mid-sized nonprofit. When you look also looking at from a revenue perspective, we're about 36 million in annual revenue. My members are registered dietitians. So they're the experts in the food and nutrition space. Now, I recognize that there are a lot of people who believe that they're experts in the food and nutrition space. And I've learned a lot since I joined this organization in July 1, 2023. I've always been a large consumer of nutrition information. I never knew, I'll be honest, and I've told this story to my staff and to my board. I didn't really understand what a registered dietitian was, even though I was seeing one at the time. I didn't know what the credentials were. So seldom would I read a medical article and not look for the MD, or read something related to nursing and not look for the RN. I now know to look for the RD or the RDN, registered dietitian or registered dietitian nutritionist. They have the same science-based background as many other healthcare providers. RDs, RDNs are a critical part of the care team, and being evidence-based and science-focused is critical to the work that the professionals that I represent do. Now, I will say there are myths out there about registered dietitians, just like there are all professional groups. And one of those myths is that registered dietitians are the food police. And I remember my first board meeting, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to have for our meals? What is being served at these events? They're not the food police. They take the time to know who you are as an individual, and they walk alongside of you to help you improve your nutritional status. And that's why this organization was created over 100 plus years ago. It was to improve the nutrition status of people. And today in 2026, that is still the primary focus of the organization. How do we help improve the nutrition status of people? Does that help some?
That's big. Thank you. Yes. And we're talking credentials here, and you are a PhD and a CAE. So let's talk about the PhD first. How and when did you decide that that was something you were going to pursue? And were you concurrently working at a association at the same time? Like, how did you find all the time for that, if that
Oh,
was the
wow.
case?
That's a loaded question. So when I first went to Wittenberg, my undergraduate institution, I actually went there for their pre-med program, and my intent was to be a physician. And I stayed on that path until senior year, and I hit physics. And I decided I'm out of here. If I've got to get through physics in order to be a physician, I'm not going to be one. But there was always this desire to have the doctor in front of the name. And you can say why. It wasn't an egotistical thing at all. It was from a perspective of being a role model. I wanted individuals and young girls who looked like me to understand what they were capable of doing and capable of being. And so I did this first start of pursuing the PhD was while I was in Dallas working at the corporate offices for the American Heart Association. And I was just traveling so much, it didn't work. So I put that dream on the back burner. And then in 2011, I picked the dream up, and 2015 did become a minted PhD. I was working full time, and that's a balancing job to be working a full time job while also pursuing a doctoral degree, or I could argue even any degree. It's a lot, and it means that you have to be organized. Personally, it means you've got to have a strong support system, both on the home front and on the professional front. And I was fortunate to be working for a phenomenal CEO at the time at the American Nurses Association who was very supportive of my journey. And I have a very supportive husband.
And the CAE credential, Certified Association Executive, when did you pursue that? Has that been for a while you've had that?
That has been for a while.
Okay.
You're asking me to go back a number of years, so the date escapes me, but it was actually I think it was right before I began my doctoral journey the second
Okay.
time.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So obviously professional, development, professional education, big important part of your journey. Now as the CEO of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, what's your day to day look like? I just want to ask that because I want to give people a kind of a peek into what your day to day looks like in case, they're maybe they have aspirations to be CEO one day and they hear your day to day and they're like, maybe that's not for me, or maybe that is what I want. So just give us a high level overview of your day to day.
There's the day to day I think I'm going to have before I open my emails up, and then my actual day to day. So in general, I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls. We are a remote organization, and we were remote before other organizations went remote, although we do have offices. Most of the time, we're not in those offices. I spend a lot of my time solving problems. So you have to be a problem solver, and I have to be able to consume a lot of information quickly and give guidance quickly. So, in addition to being a problem solver, I spend my days coaching and counseling people. So, the higher you go up the leadership ladder, it's not that those technical skills are not important, they're still important, but those softer skills take on greater importance. So, the ability to listen well, the ability to show empathy and compassion, the ability to coach people to higher levels of performance are very important. And that's whether we're talking on the staff side or on the volunteer member side. We're all growing, so I am at the core a teacher. So I enjoy teaching my staff about new philosophies and skills and ways of doing their jobs. I also enjoy helping my boards of directors grow and stretch and be even stronger, better versions of themselves. And so, if you're someone who really loves engaging with people, because this is a people oriented business, uh, and you have to love engaging with people, even when they're not the best versions of themselves. So, when I talked about problem solving, some days I'm solving member issues. Some days we've dropped the ball and we're dealing with a member or someone within our practitioner community who is upset with us. And so you're trying to quiet the storm. You're trying to do a reset on the relationship. I spend days asking for forgiveness because whether it doesn't matter who made the mistake, whether it was one of my team members, whether it might have been something that happened with the board of directors, or whether it's me, I still own it. And you have to be capable and comfortable of owning it all. These jobs also require thick skins. These are hard jobs. I love what I do. And I will also tell you, it's a hard, hard job. We have internal pressures coming at us. We also have external pressures coming at us. So I want to go back to something that I shared earlier about the importance of being a healthy leader. And you have to understand how to balance and not give your, this is probably not going to come out the way I intend for it to come out, because you want to give your all to the job, but you don't want to sell your soul to the job. You have to, I find that the most effective leaders, and when I am my most effective, is when I have balance in my life. So being involved in my community is important. Making sure I'm supporting my family is important. Exercising is important. Having hobbies is important. Binge watching British television, which I love British television. All of those things help me be balanced and allow me to have the energy and the clarity of mindset to be able to support the team, whether those are my members, whether it's the board of directors, or whether it's my staff.
Really well said. And so, all right, well, let's leave it on some final thoughts here. Is there anything I didn't, or you didn't mention about your career journey that you think will be worth noting? And then also, I want to hear about the British television shows you're into, because that's pretty generic. You could go a lot of different ways with that.
You could go a lot of different ways. The note, I guess the point I would want to emphasize on my career journey is to believe in yourself. I did not believe in myself early on for a host of reasons. I was fortunate to have wonderful, wonderful mentors and allies who saw my potential before I saw my potential. I would also share it is important for us to reach back and pull people forward. So just as people invested in me, it is important that as leaders, we reach back and invest in others. I'm a firm believer that it takes a community, and there are young people out there who are looking at us and questioning whether they can be us. And we need to be willing to walk alongside of them and mentor, coach, and support them. So in terms of the British television, it depends on where the mindset is in my need to wind down. But typically it's the murder mysteries. I love a good murder mystery and trying to solve it. I don't like all the blood and gore. I just want a mystery that makes me engage with that movie or that particular series and try to figure out the whodunit. And it doesn't really matter what the name of the show is, as long as
Okay.
it's a good mystery that engages me and I can try to figure out the whodunit.
Fair enough. And a tradition we have here on Six Degrees of Associations is, as a tip of the cap to someone who inspires you, or someone in the association world you really just want to, give a shout out to. Is there anyone along your journey who, I'm sure it's tough here putting you on the spot, but, and I did not ask you about this before we recorded today, which I usually tip my guests off to, so I apologize for that. But is there anyone you want to kind of give a mention to that helped you along your way, and even possibly nominate them as a future guest on our show that we can pick the brain of as well?
So those are two slightly different questions. So if I was giving a shout out to someone who helped me along my way, there would be many people, but the individual that first came to mind was Dudley Hafner, who was the CEO of the American Heart Association at the time. I left the South Carolina affiliate and joined the corporate offices in Dallas. He taught me so much. And from the presence of being an executive, from the perspective of not taking oneself too seriously. Those are just two of the many lessons that he taught me. In terms of someone that's in my world right now that I think would be a good guest that you might want to have a conversation with, I would say Christy Tarantino Dean from the Food Technologists Association might be a good one for you to engage in conversation.
Fair enough. Yeah, sometimes we do merge them into the same person, but I think it's actually better if it's asked separately. So thank you for that insight. We've been talking to Wylecia Wiggs Harris. She is the CEO of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and this has been a really, really awesome conversation. And thank you just so much for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.